Well, our thanks as always to Home Street Bank for their support of this podcast. If you're looking for a bank that has it all, great people, great service, great rates, this is the place for you. This is my lender of choice. It should be yours as well. Go to homestreetbank.com. It's your one-stop shop for all your banking needs, both business and personal. That's homestreetbank.com. Do you have a winner's mentality? And what does that even mean? Let's find out on today's episode of The Buyer's Mind.
Welcome to The Buyer's Mind, where we take a closer look deep inside your customer's decision-making mechanism to reverse engineer the perfect sales presentation. Now, please welcome your host, Jeff Shore.
Well, welcome everyone once again to The Buyer's Mind, where we take the opportunity to really understand this thing called sales. And sometimes what we want to do is take a little break and just try and get into the mindset of salespeople. We spend most of our time here on this podcast talking about the mindset of our customers, but every now and then we want to bring somebody in who will really help us to understand the mindset of salespeople. And man, are we going to do that today. My name is Jeff Shore, your host of The Buyer's Mind. I'm joined, as always, by our show producer, Paul Murphy. And Murph, we're going to talk about winning today. How you feeling about that?
I love to win. Show me what I need to do.
That's exactly right. I think we all love to win. The question is, A, what does that look like? And B, are we willing to do what it takes in order to win?
Wait, I have to get off my couch and stop eating the
pizza?
pizza?
You have to get off your couch, right? Oh, wow. Oh, well, hold on a second. Nobody said anything about getting off my couch. Can't I win from my couch? But this is the question. And you bring up an interesting point, Murph, right from the very beginning. Because if we're going to win, we have to be able to do two things. We've got to define what winning looks like, and then we got to put the effort in order to do that. I'm wondering which of those two is the bigger issue. Is it defining winning, or is it doing what it takes to win? What do you think?
It's a combination of both. It's one of those, what's the definition of success? It's not necessarily money, right? I think of it that way, but then you got to put in some kind of effort. And that's always the difficult part, is getting moving and staying moving.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll tell you, in our interview today, we're going to be talking to a former NFL player, a former Olympian, U.S. Olympic bobsledder. It's just a really, really interesting story as we listen to Johnny Quinn talk about his journey of winning. This guy is a winner. And I do think that there are really those two component pieces that we have to unpack. We have to look at how we define winning in the first place. And then we have to ask, am I willing to pay the price in order to win? And as we start with the idea of how we define winning, I want to encourage you and challenge you, if you're listening right now, to just ask yourself the question, how much time do you think about what winning looks like? Now, if you're in sales and your winning only looks like the sales report or your commission check, it might be a fairly narrow way to look at whether you're winning at life in general. And so we have to start by asking ourselves that question. What does winning look like? This is why goal setting is so important, and why those people who actually write down their goals and track them on a regular basis are dramatically more successful than anyone else. Now, it's not that writing down your goals and tracking them has any sort of magic power to it. No, what it does is it causes you to focus. And that focus causes you to both identify what the goal is, or to put another way, what winning looks like, but then it also allows you to get very, very specific so that you can track it and you know whether you're headed in that direction. The process of writing down what winning looks like gives you that sense of direction. I know what I am moving towards when I do that. Otherwise, I'll tell you what's going to happen. Other people are going to dictate your career for you. Right now, I'm talking about winning at life, but you can absolutely dial this back to how you win in sales. What does success look like to you? What does winning look like to you? Aim big. Define it clearly. Get it comfortable in your mind. Know where you want to end up, and then those steps will roll out right in front of you. I know I'm sounding a little preachy right here, but I'm telling you, I am just, quite frankly, just sick and tired of hearing the sad stories about people who have made up excuses. Look, there are people out there, I get it. They've got legitimate barriers to their success, but that doesn't mean that they can't be overcome. But what I'm talking about is the people who have false barriers, addictions to comfort that stand in the way of rebuilding their lives the way that they want to, have designated their lives to live them the way that they want to. And I want to encourage you right now to take those false barriers and set them aside. Define what winning looks like, and then write the steps in order to get on that path. And if you need a little inspiration, we're going to get it with today's interview. From time to time on our podcast, we like to bring people on who are two things: really interesting and really driven. And I think you're going to find that very much with our guest today. He is Johnny Quinn. He's a professional speaker and enthusiaster. Is that a word? That should be a word, enthusiaster. He speaks to businesses. He speaks to schools. He speaks to all kinds of organizations around the world. But he is a former Olympian and a former NFL football player. And boy, there's even more. We're just scratching the surface. He is the most interesting man in the world. Please welcome Johnny Quinn. Johnny, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. Thank you for such a warm introduction. That was so nice.
Well, it is an interesting story. Let's face it. And I said right from the very beginning, we like to talk to people who love to win and who are really interesting. In your case, it's not love to win. Just based on your bio alone, it sounds much more like a have to win. Like that's just sort of in your DNA that you have to win.
Well, when I turned pro at 22 years old, I entered the NFL. I had no choice. If I wanted to stick around, there's no, I want to win. I have to. And I have to. Early on, I learned the hard way. I kept getting cut. And then when I made that switch to Olympic sports, I tell you what, to become a U.S. Olympian, wear the red, white, and blue, and walk in opening ceremonies, it was unbelievable. Yeah.
You were in the Sochi, Russia Olympics in 2014 as part of the bobsled team. How, just step us into that journey. How does one become an Olympic bobsledder?
Well, you watch the movie Cool Runnings over and over and over again, right?
It's that easy, huh?
My agent represented a bobsledder back in the day, and when professional football was over for me, I was a little upset because I kept getting cut, and I knew I still had something left in the tank.
Right.
And I remember my agent goes, Johnny, they look for former football players with a track background. I ran track in college as well, for bobsled. And so I started in 2010. And in 2014, 4 short years later, I made my first Olympic team as a U.S. bobsledder.
Yeah. That's amazing. And both in the NFL, which I think everybody understands, incredibly competitive environment. There are a whole lot of people that want to play in the National Football League. But then to be Olympians as well, the number of people that have dreams of the Olympics is absolutely stunning. You're really saying that you needed to win just to survive, right? If you weren't a winner, you couldn't exist. You couldn't live in those worlds. So then after the Olympics and after the NFL, now you're starting this career over here. You've got an insurance business. You got a speaking business. How much did that carry over? That sense of almost desperation to win, just to be relevant. How much did that carry over into your next career?
It's kind of beautiful to see how much synergy between sport and business there really is. I mean, a lot of the things I learned in the NFL, what it took to become an Olympian, the grit, the teamwork, the ability to face and fight through adversity, the ability to use failure not as a setback, but to springboard you to future success. All those play true in the business world. And so when I got back from the Olympics, I would speak, in the off season and things like that. But after I made my first Olympic team, it just kind of blew up because now businesses, companies, organizations all across the globe, they want to know, okay, how can we think like an Olympian? And so I've been able to go in and inspire and motivate and handle, and hand over tools that we use to prepare for the greatest competition in the world athletically, and that people can use every single day. And so there's so many synergies that go from sport and just transition right over to business nice and smoothly.
Let's talk about how you deal with failure and setbacks. You've had, I think, we learned this from really successful people, right? You show me you show me somebody who has succeeded a lot, and I'll show you somebody who failed a lot along the way. How when you hit those setbacks, whether it was I just got cut by NFL team, or I tried out over here, it didn't work, or I'm dealing with an injury that really cost me a great opportunity. How much time did you mourn, as it were? How much time did you spend just sort of like you got to feel a little sorry for yourself before you kind of reset your mind? How did you deal with that shift when you hit adversity and setbacks along the way?
Well, I think you touched on something special there, that a lot of people jump over the mourning phase of a failure, and you really need that. You don't want to mask it over, because it's going to come back up at some point if you don't, spend the necessary, now not too much, but necessary amount of time to mourn. And I remember, again, when I entered the NFL at 22 years old, it was a dream come true.
Sure.
But by age 26, I'd been cut 3 times. I lost $2.6 million, and I blew out my knee. Mm-hmm. And so here I am, career, an absolute train wreck. And what do you do, right? How do you handle that? And as I look back at those times, the people I surrounded myself with, and here's what a lot of people miss. What was I watching? What was I reading? Who was I listening to during those tough times? Because that matters. You're so vulnerable after a failure. And so you've got to check in and kind of do what we call like an internal diagnostic on, okay, what is consuming my attention right now during this failure season, whatever it may be, however long it might be for you. And I've got to tell you, 26, right, career train wreck, lost all those, NFL contracts. But at age 30, when in the world of, pro sports, they call 30 old to become a United States Olympian, right? To use that failure, that season of failure, to kind of mentally chisel away the things that might have been holding me back, prepared me for my next success, which was even bigger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's only a question. It's not whether you're going to be down. It's a question whether you're going to stay down, right? I mean, that's right. Got to be a big part of it. That's a conscious decision that you had to make. What am I going to do here? Am I going to let this keep me down, or am I going to move back into gear here?
That's right. Everybody experiences failure at some level, and when you look, I thought you hit it right on the head when you said, when you look at somebody's success, the reality is when you kind of pull away the veil and you pull away all the hype, they have failed over and over and over, but they got up one more time. Yeah. And they kept getting up. And you just see that across the board in any industry, in any profession. The ultra performers that get it done, that are the producers, they failed, but they've got back up.
Something else that you mentioned too that I think is really, really important here. You asked the question, who was I paying attention to? What was I watching? Who was I listening to? If you're going to be in the NFL, if you're going to be in the Olympics, you are surrounding yourself with people of just a different mindset altogether. So how much did that association of being around successful people have an impact on your career?
I think what was neat was when you're in that type of atmosphere where everybody's a professional and everybody is producing at the highest level consistently across the board. What caught my attention was observing and understanding what they did outside of the field, so to speak. From a recovery standpoint. Maybe how they treated staff that weren't their, direct coaching staff, how they interacted with fans, how they managed family life with such a commitment in the NFL. When you're in that type of setting, you're able to observe kind of the full picture that you wouldn't see or catch on a TV show or a highlight blooper. You get to see everything, and so that was some of the things that drew me into was watching the people that produced at a high level and just see how they balanced life.
Absolutely, yeah, and it couldn't help, I would think, but be contagious to some extent. Let's go back to Sochi for just a moment, because not only were you an Olympic bobsledder, but you found a very interesting and unexpected claim to fame in your experience. I think you know what I'm talking about. What happened that made the major media all over the world?
Isn't that funny? I ended up breaking out of my bathroom door, and I'll give you a little bit of a backstory on that.
Yeah.
But who knew a door would create so much excitement? And I was in the Olympic Village taking a shower, and I could not get out of my bathroom. Mm-hmm. And so I had to, break down this bathroom door, and I didn't have my phone with me. So I used my fist. I get out, and I realized as I kind of look back, I'm like, oh my goodness, I've got this giant hole in my door. And so I go down and notify the USOC to let them know that, hey, we ran into an issue with the door. And just to kind of head off, there was no horseplaying going on. We literally had a problem with the door.
Right.
And sure enough, I put the photo on social media. And in 24 hours, it was retweeted by 28,000 people, seen by an estimated 10 million people around the world. Just crazy.
It's such a great story. It really is. Yeah. And by the way, if you're listening to this podcast right now and you're sitting in front of your computer, if you go to Johnny Quinn USA .com, and we'll put that in the show notes, go to his about page, scroll down, you'll see an actual picture of the busted Sochi, the famous now busted Sochi door. Along the way, you've had this great ride because you've been able to do some pretty cool things. You were an American Ninja Warrior. You had a chance to meet the president. You've just, do you sometimes just pinch yourself and go, this has been a pretty good ride? Or do you look at it and say, no, I worked hard for this. I'm not surprised at all.
Well, it's a little bit of both. Mm-hmm. You're thankful for the opportunities that come your way. But you're also not naive that they just showed up. There's been ample hours of commitment, work, sweat, things like that poured into it. So it truly is. You want to be present in the moment. You want to enjoy the moment for what it is. But at the same time, you realize what it took to get you there.
You speak a lot to businesses. You also speak quite a bit to schools. When you're talking to students, how does your presentation change, and what are you trying to teach kids today that I'm sure just based on you and I have talked in the past, and just even based on this conversation. Clearly, your heart is for more than just, hey, everybody, you can be an Olympic athlete. It's you want to give them lifelong lessons. So, what is the core message that you want to give to students out there?
Well, the neat thing about playing in the NFL and being a U.S. Olympian is now I have a platform, mm-hmm. and I want to use that in a way to impact people, because the reality of somebody else becoming an Olympian, it's out there, mm-hmm. but it's small, and not a lot of people might want to do that. And so when I go speak at schools, different things like that, at least in the school setting. One thing I talk a lot about, and I really think this is a key differentiator for students, especially with the world we live in, is how to be good listeners, right? And I talk about the teachers that they see every day, right? The parents at the PTA or PTO, their own family, whatever it may be. You've got teachers, you've got parents that love and care about you. And so I pose this question. They used to sit in assemblies just like you are today when I'm at this school or whatever it may be. Are we borrowing wisdom from people that love and care about us? Because that's something that we can all do at any age, is become better listeners. And so that's one of the things we talk about, especially in a school setting, is are we being good listeners? And if we are, who are we listening to? And we want to listen to the people that love and care about us and have been where we've been.
When I'm thinking about you and your life and your accomplishments, I don't think most people would listen to this interview and say, I'll tell you one thing about Johnny Quinn. He's probably a really great listener. And yet this is a core part of your message. How did your own listening skills affect your success up to this point? Is this just something you've learned and then taught to the kids? Or is this something you looked at and you said, no, I had to borrow wisdom from people who loved and cared about me before I could be in this position?
Well, it really started when I kept getting cut in the NFL. Mm-hmm. And those were my first, major failures, so to speak. And it was at that time that I was, kind of looking for direction on, okay, well, what do you do? How do you do this? And so I would read different books. I would listen to podcasts. I would consume content in various forms to learn from others who've experienced failure, but then use that to springboard to future successes. And so this is something that I've been doing for years now. And here's the cool thing when I go speak about it. I've seen the fruits of the labor mature, right? I've seen the harvest. I've seen putting in the work and then realizing the dream. And so when I speak on it because I've seen it happen in real life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And it certainly shows through. When you think back on your career up to this point, is there one, if I asked you to pinpoint one moment that was most significant for you, can you do that? Can you hit that one moment that seemed like this is it? If I could freeze this moment in time, I would certainly do it.
Yeah, it was getting back up after getting cut. Mm-hmm. When you grow up in Texas and you play Texas high school football, I had a lot of success. I led the state of Texas in catches. I got a Division I scholarship where I left as the school's all-time leading receiver. So I kept having success after success after success. And when I experienced that first cut, and maybe that's for somebody listening, maybe it was their first job that they got let go at, mm-hmm. or maybe it was their first failed relationship. I don't know. Something big. When something big happens, I remember the first time I got cut, getting back up. Mm-hmm. It gave me confidence that, hey, if it happens again, I know what to do. Mm-hmm. I know that I need to get back up.
Yeah, absolutely. You released a book this year called Push, Breaking Through the Barriers. Tell us about that journey.
Yeah, it's been such a neat process, mm-hmm. Becoming an author, and my goal here is this is the first of hopefully many books.
Yeah.
But it was neat to release that book. And I wrote this book. When I go and speak, most companies and organizations book me for an hour. And what I noticed is I get off the stage after an hour, and we have this long line of, questions, just looking for more content. And so I wrote this in such a way that whether you've heard me speak at a keynote message or not, but that you can kind of understand how I think as an Olympian and how to break through barriers in your own life. Because what I've seen, and I walk through this in my life, is that sometimes we carry or we're surrounded by these invisible barriers that hinder us in life. It could be, again, a failed relationship. It could be something maybe a parent said growing up. It could be, a business venture gone south. But we carry these invisible barriers around. And so I wrote this to help people break through barriers in their life.
Give us an example of what an invisible barrier might look like.
Well, growing up, I've been an undersized athlete, so to speak, my entire life. The ideal bobsledder is 6'3", mm-hmm. 235 pounds. I'm 5'11" and 7/8, mm-hmm. and I weighed 220. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to find a way to get the job done. Mm-hmm. And so, in the athletic realm, there's this mythical, magical, you need to be a certain height and weight to be a professional athlete. That's not true. Mm-hmm. What you need to do is produce at a high level consistently. That's how you be a professional athlete.
Yeah, yeah. Does that leave you with a distaste or at least an unsettling when you see people who very much love to play the victim card and show you all the reasons why they can't be successful? Does that cause you to look at it and you go, this is all in your mind?
Well, it is frustrating to see. Mm-hmm. It is definitely frustrating to see. But at the end of the day, I'm in control of my actions. And if you're a listener here, you're in control of your actions. And that is wonderful news, because when you realize and you take ownership, whether it's 90% ownership or 10% ownership, you're taking ownership and understanding, what? My attitudes, my actions, they're going to reap an effect. Mm-hmm. And whatever that's going to be, I'm going to be in control of that. And so ultra performers, they get this. They understand that they own their actions, and there's freedom in that. There's freedom in that.
There's freedom in that. Expand on that, because it's such an interesting concept. There's freedom in owning your own actions. Tell us why.
Well, if you think about whatever line of profession you're in, mm-hmm. I'll give you an example. I'm in sales, and so when I'm not on the road speaking, I own an insurance agency. And so there's freedom in understanding that if the sales aren't coming in, We can either complain about the market, we can complain about pricing, we can complain about factors that are outside of our control, or we can talk about prospecting. And we can look at the way we're following up, and we can look at how we're handling our current client base. Which side do I want to play? You can't play both.
Right.
But which side do you want to play? Well, I want to be on the controllable side. Let me see. Am I prospecting the way I used to prospect when I first got started? Right? Am I, delivering the same care and attention when I first began? When you have that enthusiasm, those are all controllables. That's where ultra performers play, and that's where you have the most freedom.
Move the clock well forward to your retirement dinner many, many decades from now. People are going to line up and say nice things about Johnny Quinn. What are you hoping, if you could put it in a sentence, what are you hoping that they will say about you at the end of your career?
Well, I've got an interesting perspective on retirement. There's not a magical age where I plan on hanging it up, so to speak. I see this. Why do I want to wait until I'm 60, 65? I turned 35 this year. I want to design and create a life now that I can enjoy and love into my 40s, my 50s, and so on. I think looking back at whatever age, as I continue to get older, I want people to understand that I did it the right way. Put in the work, and I wasn't owned by my work, right? My identity wasn't tied to my accomplishments, but that I've been a loving husband. I've been a present father, right? Getting ready to step into a new season of life. That's what I want to be known as.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. All right. Before we wrap it up here, we always like to put our guests on the hot seat. A few rapid fire questions, rapid fire answers. You ready?
I'm ready.
Your very, very first paid job in your life?
Kroger. I was a bagger.
There you go. When you were 10 years old, you thought you would be what?
A professional athlete.
Of course you did. The most beautiful place you've ever stood?
Maui, Hawaii. I was there 3 days ago.
Can't argue there. Any book that you have read that made a profound impact on your life?
Love Does by Bob Goff.
Very nice. A movie you've seen multiple times but would quickly watch again?
Ace Ventura, Pet Detective.
Had your first celebrity crush?
My wife, Amanda Quinn.
Oh, nicely played. Good job. Just let her listen to the last couple of minutes of the interview, and you'll get some serious husband points right there. Johnny, just so great talking to you. It's just such a fantastic story. And I don't know, there's just a part of me that just says, the best is yet to come. I like to think of that from my own life, but I just have to believe that there's a lot more out there for Johnny Quinn. I've told people on this podcast before that one of my mottos is that life is a buffet, and I want to die full. I have a feeling that you and I are cut out of that same cloth.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Johnny. Well, Murph, I told you we like to have people who are driven and interesting, and I certainly think Johnny Quinn hits the bill in both cases there.
Olympic athlete, NFL, not much more driven than that. I can't imagine.
I mean, the guy's been all over the news. He met the president, and on top of all that, he was on American Ninja Warrior. I mean, really, it's like, that's it, the crowning jewel. I really appreciate a number of things that he said, but especially just the idea of how you bounce back from adversity, the opportunity to say, okay, I'm going to sit in this for a little bit just to figure out kind of what happened and what do I do next, and then I'm going to move forward with my life. But you got the sense that he's somebody who has learned, probably by necessity, just what it means to deal with adversity and let it bring out the best of you.
Well, it may not be a good example, but I'll throw it out anyway. I look at Tebow, and I think here's a guy who tried football, moved on to baseball, and who knows what he's going to move on to next, but whatever. He's another kind of guy like that that's very driven and wants to succeed, and so he's not going to sit there or have a pity party. He's going to pick himself up and figure out what he needs to do.
And it's a good example because, like Johnny Quinn, Tim Tebow, in addition to his athletic exploits, he's out there just making a huge impact with his charitable work, and so he's just sort of that same mindset. He wants to live a full life and to make a difference wherever he can. And I would look at it and say that this is just a great mindset of winners. Winners aren't just interested in winning for themselves; they're interested in everybody else winning around them. This is true for great salespeople. This is true for great professionals. They have that winning mindset that goes beyond just simply, I want some, right? I want a bigger commission, or I want a nicer car, or whatever it is. There's that sense of making an impact, of making a difference on the planet and getting beyond yourself. But I really just love the idea that the stories and the excuses are always there for us. They're there for the taking. They're sitting right in front of us, and they almost kind of want to dance around and say, here I am, adopt me. I'm going to make you feel so much better. I've got a built-in excuse why you can't be successful, because you are too short, or because you're too old, or because you don't have the right academic pedigree or the right experience over here, or you're this gender or that gender, whatever it is. But if you look at that winning mindset, we find people who are incredibly successful in all walks of life, from all different backgrounds, because they simply looked at it and said, what does winning look like? And if you get that well defined, everything changes right in front of you. If you've got that winner's mentality, to where you look and you say, I have to win. And I don't just mean win by getting more sales than anybody else. I have to win at life. I have to win at living the life that I am supposed to live. That's the idea. You listen to people like Johnny Quinn, and you can almost hear the desperation to ask the question, am I living the life that I am supposed to live? And I just want to encourage you and challenge you right now to ask yourself that question, to ask some very tough questions about your own life. Am I living the life that I'm supposed to live? Am I winning at life? That's the question. When you win at life, your customers win too, and your family and your company and all those people that really mean something to you. When you win at life, you have the opportunity to go out there and change someone's world. We'll see you next time on The Buyer's Mind.